my first interest came about when I was age 6, and it was during the war, and there was a jumble sale at the local church hall, and my mother gave me sixpence, my brother sixpence and my sister sixpence, and so that we could buy something at the jumble sale. Now my brother bought a football, my sister bought a doll, and I bought a big Victorian oil painting with a big gold frame on it for sixpence. And I can still see the picture now. It had a farm and cows and a river and trees and a man fishing, and I thought it was wonderful. And then my friends, because it was so heavy, 3 or 4 of my friends helped me carry it home. And when I got it home, my mother went, "You can take that old-fashioned thing back. We're not having," because nobody wanted things like that during the war. So I took it back to the jumble sale, and they let me swap it for some comics. So that was my first introduction to art, and I think it must have been in my DNA that I should have bought a painting at the age of 6. So that's how it all started. When I was teaching, I was collecting. I was permanently in debt because I couldn't not buy a picture when I saw one. And the bank manager, it was only a small place in Asif, and most of the kids from school used to walk past the bank going home for their lunch. And then they'd come to me and say, "Oh, Mr. Jones wants to see you, Mr. Gooding, at the bank." And I don't crumbs. And so I go, he said, "You've been buying pictures, haven't you?" He said, "You know your overdraft's gone up to nearly £60. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones," I said, "I'll really make a big effort now." And then I wouldn't buy anything then for a while. Then I'd start buying, and then he'd send for me again. He said, "You know your overdraft is nearly 200. He said, "If you carry on like this, David, I'm going to stop honouring your cheques." "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones." And so I was trying to be sensible, and over the next couple of years, I can remember 3 pictures I didn't buy because I was being sensible, and I've never forgotten them, and I've always regretted that I didn't buy them, because I used to say to myself, if you buy it and you can't really afford it, in a year's time you won't be any worse off, but you still have the picture. But if you don't buy it, you won't be any better off in a year's time, but you won't have the picture either. And that was the logic I used to continue my collecting. Well, my short painting career lasted about a fortnight, and I was about 25, 30 years ago, I was looking at the paintings and I thought I could do that. So I went to Halifax, and regardless of expense, I bought the most expensive canvas, which was, I think was £25, but you could get one for 20 or 15 or even 10, but I bought the most expensive. I also bought a pack of sable brushes, a palette. I stopped short of a beret, and I bought every colour of oil paint devised by man since the Middle Ages. So I had a huge collection of paints, and I came back and I thought, now what can I paint? Decided to paint a vase. So I did the outline of the vase, and I thought, well, it's a one-dimensional vase, that is. So I mixed black and white to try and make a shadow down the side, and I smudged the shadow down to make it look like a shadow. And it looked like one-dimensional vase with smudgy edge. And I persevered for a couple of weeks, and in the end I realised it's much harder than it looks. So a young artist who was local and was always hard up, he came in one day and said, "I've got a present for you. Here's a canvas, here's some paints, here's some brushes, and here's a palette. I never want to see them again." And he was thrilled to bits, and he went off smiling with all his newfound wealth. I began teaching in 1961. 1959 I spent a year in France where I learned to speak French as part of my degree course. Then I did a year's of teacher's training, then I started teaching in 61. And my first job, I saw that there was a French teacher wanted at St Asaph Grammar School in North Wales. So I applied, and I went for the interview, and there were 6 candidates for the interview, and I was lucky to be awarded the job, and I got the job as French teacher. And I went down, it's a small town, so I went down to the town and I went for a pee in the toilet. And a bloke came and stood alongside me, and he said, "Didn't I see you at the interview?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I got the French job." He said, "Oh, well, I got the maths job," because there was also 6 people for the maths job. So we palled up, and then we became good friends, and because it was both our first jobs. And then when he got married, I was his best man. Then I was godfather to his first child, and then he left the area, moved to other jobs, but we always kept in touch. And he ended up as head of maths at Alder Hill in Rochdale School, and I used to visit them there. And then eventually his marriage broke up, and he moved out to the family home, leaving his wife with the 4 children, and he bought a one down cottage, and then he came over to see me one weekend, and he saw I had about 250 paintings by this time. The walls were covered in every room, big house. And then he said, "I don't know why you don't pack in teaching and open a gallery." And I said, "Oh, well," I said, "I wouldn't, you know, it's very chancy, you know, going into business, and you know, teaching's a good job, and you've got a pension, etc., etc." And he said, "Well, I'd join you, I'd become a business partner with you," because he hated teaching, but I didn't, I liked it. And anyway, I said, "I'll think about it." Well, my brother and sister both said, "Do it, because if you don't do it now, you'll never do it. You've always wanted a gallery." So I phoned Brian up on the Sunday evening, and I said, "Listen, I'm going to give it some serious thought, that suggestion of yours about opening a gallery." And that was it. Well, then the following morning I went off to school, taught all day, came home, and the phone went. It was Brian, and he said, "Listen," he said, "you've got to open a gallery now, because I've resigned today." And so he panicked me into resigning the following day, and that was it. And then I thought, where can I open the gallery? And I thought, this area is good because of the big conurbations of Bradford, Halifax, Rochdale, etc., etc. So I came to stay, and he had this one down cottage in above Bacup, and so we set off to try and find it. We went to Manchester first, but I couldn't afford to buy the galleries there. I wanted a gallery where I could live above it. I didn't want a gallery, a lock-up, because there's nothing more soul-destroying than sitting there reading magazines and drinking tea all day when you don't get many customers in a gallery. So we then thought we'd try Halifax, and on the morning we were going to go and see Halifax, I was sleeping on a camp bed at Brian's, which had metal struts on a pre-war job, and when I woke up my back was killing me because I had these metal struts and I couldn't stand hardly. I said, "Look," and we were driving towards Halifax, and I said, "Stop at this little town." It was Todmorden, and I said, "I'll have to get some painkillers from the chemist." So I went to the chemist's painkillers. He said, "Oh, look, there's a shop for sale in Water Street here." And I could afford that, but we thought, no, in Halifax would be better. So we went to Halifax, and any properties that were in the middle of the town were far too expensive for me. And the ones I could afford were these long rows of side streets of terraces of houses with a little shop on the corner that was often a corner shop. I thought, well, there's no good having a gallery there. So on the way back, we thought, well, we'll go and see this shop in Todmorden. And I thought it was wonderful. It was 4 stories, and I could afford it, so I bought it, and that's how Todmorden Fine Art came into being in 1981. Well, we opened with no money but my collection of pictures, and at that time I had the cellar as part of the gallery as well, so the place was full of pictures. And then for the first couple of months it was pretty hard going because nobody knew we were here, but little by little people began to buy the pictures, and we just kept going and going. And then for the first few years we sold Victorian and 18th century pictures, and we used to buy them at Sotheby's and Christie's in London, and that did very well because of course business was booming then, and we sold everything. Well then, when the recession came, all of a sudden nobody wanted pictures, and so the pictures we bought in auction, the Victorian ones, we had to put them back into auction and lost a lot of money on them. But we'd already had some, because my own collection contained a lot of contemporary work, such as Don McIntyre, and so we began to sell Don McIntyre, and then we were selling some of the Liverpool painters, Tony Butler, Millicent N. Lots of the famous Liverpool painters began to show their work, and then little by little we built the clientele, and the computer made a big difference. So I never had a computer, and then this guy came in one day and he said, "Oh, what's your website?" And I said, "I haven't got one." He said, "Well, how would you send your emails?" I said, "I haven't got a computer." He said, "Ridiculous, a business like this with no computer." He said, "Look," he said, "I've got plenty in the offices in Manchester. I'll bring you one next." I said, "I don't want it. I'll never understand it, and I don't want it." Anyway, the following week, he turns up with his computer. I said, what don't you understand? I don't want it." So he pushed his way past me upstairs, put it on the table, and he said, "Now sit there, shut up and listen." And so I learned how to do the computer, and that saved my business really, because having so little footfall in Todmorden, I send them now to all over. Well, I first met Geoff Key when, coincidentally, the week that we opened our gallery in 1981, this other small gallery run by Campbell and Judith Malone in Todmorden. So it was the first time Todmorden ever had a gallery, and they had two on the same week. And I went to an exhibition there once, and they had some small paintings by Geoffrey Key. And I thought, crumbs, he's good, he's a marvellous painter. And a bit later, I contacted Geoff and went over to see him, and I was just mesmerised by the quality of the work and the number he had. He had huge numbers. There was one room in Acresfield Road which was stacked from wall to wall with paintings, all framed and going back over many years. And so we were able to cherry pick, and it brought half a dozen that time, sold them, and they were very reasonably priced, of course, at that time. Well, they're still reasonably priced, but they're very expensive. And then for years we sold his work, and I remember Geoff saying that we sold more of his work than any other gallery. And an amusing episode was once when I went there, and he'd done a series of clown paintings, and I think there probably were about 15, 16 oils of clowns, and maybe 8, 9, 10 gouaches and watercolours of clowns and drawings. And I saw them and I said, "God almighty, Geoff, they are fantastic." And I scanned up and down, I thought, well, they're all brilliant, but there were 8 that were mega. I thought, I've got to get my hands on those one way or another. So he said, "Well, I'm not selling the clowns yet." They were all ready for off, they were all framed and everything. I said, I'm not selling them yet because there's a book coming out later on the clown series." "Oh," I said, "is that so?" And I thought, now how can I get around that one? So I said, "Listen, Geoff, please, please, please let me have 2 of the pictures." Well, he said, "I don't really want to part with them yet until the book comes out." And I said, "Oh, Geoff, please." And he said, "Well, all right." I said, "Look, make it 4 and that's it." So he said, "All right, you can take 4 then." So I took 4, came back, sold them all, went back. I said, "Geoff, I know a nightmare, but can I please, please have 2 more?" And he said, "Oh, Dave," he said, "you're a bloody nuisance." "Oh, please." I said, "Please, Geoff." "Well, all right." He says, "But by 2, I suppose you mean 4. I said, "Oh, thanks, Geoff, thanks very much. Yeah, okay. He said, "All right, then you can have 4 more. I thought, good, well, I've got the 8 I wanted. And then he said, "At this rate, there'll be no bloody pictures left by the time the book comes out." But I came back and I sold the 8, and I had a couple of the drawings and gouaches as well. I sold them. Well, Don Mckinlay I met through the same gallery that opened in Todmorden the same week that we did, and Campbell Malone, who was the solicitor, he had offices in Todmorden as well as in Manchester. So he said to me one day, "Why don't you come round to my offices," he said, "and I've got some pictures there that I've been buying." So I went there and I saw this amazing, quite big Don Mckinlay, and I think that's the one he's donated to Dean Clough. And it was of a man sitting on a bed with a bandage on his head and a couple of other figures. Absolutely stunning. I said, "God, where did you get the money to buy that from, Jeff?" I assumed it was a famous painter. And he said, "Oh no," he said, "it wasn't all that dear, it's by Don Mckinlay." I said, "God, he's amazing." I said, "I must get to find out who he is." So I came back in, I did a lot of searching through books, and eventually I found out where he was, contacted him, went over there, and began to get work from him, and they were astonishing, and I sold a hell of a lot of work. They weren't immediate sellers because they're extremely sophisticated, his paintings, and they weren't sort of, the average Joe tends to like things that look a bit photographic, but Don's was subtle and sophisticated, and beautifully painted and beautifully handled paint. So, but I sold a heck of a lot of them anyway. He wanted to do some drawings of me, so he did, I don't know, must be 40, 50, 60 drawings. He came every Wednesday and he did a drawing of me down in the shop, sitting in a chair. And I never ever saw one of them because he'd never let me see them. I said, "Can I have a look?" "No," he said, "you can't see it because if you see it, you might make a comment and then that will influence how I see it." So I never ever saw it, but then he'd ring me later and say him and his wife, Yanni, they'd put it up on the piano and they were looking at it, and then he'd say, "Oh, today's drawing was fantastic, marvellous, I'm very pleased with it." And he'd say that very often, and then now and then he'd say, "Remember when I said it's finished?" And you said, "Oh, good." And then I said, "Well, I'll just do this extra bit." He said, "And doing that, I ruined the drawing." He said, "I should have left it when I said it was finished." But he said, and even Yanni agrees with me that it hasn't worked as a drawing. So that's how it went, but I've never ever seen the drawings. Yanni will have them now in John's estate.